I'll just ask Councillor Josh to read a Karakia. Thank you.
E oha ki runga ki a Ranginui, e oha ki raro ki a Papatunuku, turakina na mea ki te pai a tie, uhia mai o korowai aroha. He taonga ma mātou, ka puta ki te waiao ki te o marama. Haumi e, hui e, tai ki e. I acknowledge those things above, the sky, the universe, and the heavens. I acknowledge those things below, the earth in all its entirety. Cast all negativity to the distant horizons. Cover us with the cloak of affection and love as a treasure bestowed upon us. So we may enter into enlightenment, let it be bound and fixed, yes fixed, let it be agreed by all. Amen.
Thank you. Today we've got quite a busy meeting. We've got 6 presentations, and I welcome the presenters and the representatives of the various different organisations to the meeting. I've generally taken a fairly liberal attitude in the past with allowing questions to turn into comment and things like that. Today I'll have to be a bit stricter because we have got quite a number to be heard. So, members, if you can please just keep to questions rather than debate through this and help us along. Thank you. Peter. I will do apologies in a second. So I'll call for apologies. And I have one, Councillor Charlotte. I'll just read out the members of the committee so that it's clear who has voting rights on this committee and who apologies should be accepted from. Myself, of course, Mayor Andrew Tripe, Deputy Mayor Helen Craig, Councillor Charlotte Melser, Glenda Brown, Michael Law, Peter Oscom and Ross Fallon. So I'll accept the apology from Councillor Charlotte. Those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Councillor Ross seconded. Yeah. Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Josh.
Thanks, Councillor Rob. I know I'm not a member of this committee and therefore can't vote, but I just want to make it clear that during the Pākaitori Historic Reserve board presentation that I am a member of that board. I'm a council appointee, and that I'll be joining the presenter alongside her for that part of the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Josh. Next item on the agenda is the confirmation of minutes of the Aspirations and Project Committee held on the Council Chamber at the 29th of August at 9:30 a.m. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Peter. Seconder. Councillor Deputy Mayor Helen. Those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, 5.1, is approval of community funding requests. Mike Fermor. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just make a few comments on this item. At the last committee meeting, it was agreed that a report would be brought back to this meeting to clarify the process of approving the funding for the projects that the community groups present to this committee in relation to the 2024 long-term plan, and in particular approving unbudgeted expenditure or unbudgeted funding in this current year to enable some of these projects to proceed prior to the long-term plan. Perhaps as a starting point, it should be noted that the process that we have been following to date is to ensure that the community groups, that when they present to this committee, they understand that the projects that they are putting forward will be considered by Council as it builds its 2024 long-term plan. While there's no guarantee that Council will actually approve funding or other resources to support their projects, the process that we are following is enabling these groups to get in front of elected members early in the process of building the long-term plan. And it's worth noting that the feedback that we have received from the community groups is very positive and very supportive of this new initiative that we have been following for this long-term plan. Now, officers' recommendation is that we continue to follow this process and that we don't approve funding for projects prior to us adopting the long-term plan. Now, having said that, the report does acknowledge that Council, on recommendations from this committee and other committees, obviously can approve unbudgeted expenditure where it considers that exceptional circumstances exist or there's undue risk of delaying the piece of work. The presentation from the community group, which sparked this discussion at the last committee meeting, did not indicate that for their project exceptional circumstances existed to warrant Council bypassing its own agreed processes. So, having said all that, the recommendation that officers are putting to the committee is that this committee notes that all new funding requests from the community groups are considered through the 24-34 long-term plan. So happy to take questions.
Are there any questions for Mike? Mayor Andrew.
I'll just note, which number is it? 4.4, which says that the committee members asked whether this funding request could be approved immediately. So that was following the presentation last time. And so they talk about to commence on the management plan. I'm not sure whether we saw a full management plan last time. Is that correct?
Their initiative was for them to lead the work on a management plan. So the management plan hasn't been conducted. The piece of work was to produce a management plan, was for Council to provide funding to enable that to happen.
Gotcha.
So that funding was not approved by this committee to go forward through to Council. It was decided a report would come back to this committee first, just to talk about the process of when these community groups present.
Yeah. So the funding was for a management plan.
It was 5,000 per year over 3 years.
Right. That's right. So if they don't, are there others that could, or might, or may want to also be involved in the developing a management plan?
Yeah, the paper that they put forward to Council did list a number of potential interested groups, and it did indicate that they would be, if this was to proceed, that they would be in communication with the groups for them to contribute to the management plan.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Peter.
Yes, thank you, Mike. The what you just said is also coming up in the operations agenda, isn't it?
This particular report isn't in the operations committee.
No, what you talked about, that the recommendation for the process, yeah, I thought it was coming up in the operations thing, and when
I'm uncertain of that, sorry.
no, because yeah, okay.
Any other questions? Councillor Michael.
Hi, Mike. What is the current cost of maintenance of the land?
I can't answer that question.
Okay. And apologies, I would have sent these through to you, but I only come up with them half an hour ago. Do we know what will what the plan will achieve in terms of, will it be lowering costs for us in the future? Or is there an outcome that was derived and proven?
The outcome that they're trying to achieve this particular situation is to come to a management plan at how best use can be used of that particular land, and how council can manage that land. Look, the outcome looks to be a good outcome, but again, the recommendation is that we consider this as we consider all the other requests, community initiatives through the long-term plan, and not put precedents one above the other.
Point of clarification through the chair.
Yes.
This item, what we're voting on, is not to approve funding for that group or any particular group. It is that we won't consider, if you look back at the recommendation, it says that, notes that all new funding requests from community groups to this committee are to be considered through the 24-34 long-term plan. So it's re-establishing the basis. That's what this decision is. This is what this paper is. It's re-establishing that we would not fund any group until it goes through the LTP. It was raised at the last meeting that maybe some groups could be funded now as opposed to waiting for the LTP process. So the council staff are trying to say, hey, no, we shouldn't do that.
Point of clarification, I may have the wrong report in front of me then, because the report I've got is about, yes, option A around not doing so, but the entire report is about approving $5,000 for Bushy as a option 2 to do so on budgeted funds. So I'm a little bit confused in the report now.
What's the date at the top of your
No, that
paper?
it is correct that what he's talking about. Clause 19 does mention those outlines, but the context of this item, though, is not to discuss those particular applications. It's to clarify the process going forward, that these will go forward for a future decision as part of the LTP process.
Okay.
Sorry, Michael, you probably...
No, that's
Correct,
fine.
Chair.
I'll just readjust, Chair. Apologies, and I'll come back with another question.
Thank you.
Mr Chair?
Deputy Mayor Helen.
I would actually like to request that this item lay on the table. And I'll explain why if you would allow me to.
Well, you're not supposed to have spoken to the item.
I haven't spoken to it.
Oh, you've,
I was just clarifying a point being raised.
yeah. Well, I'll take that.
Thank you. Looking at this paper, and I thank staff for bringing it. My problem is I think the discussion points here are very council focused. They are not necessarily community focused. This is a brand new committee, and I think that we're still feeling our way. And what concerns me is that we are getting fantastic ideas and projects brought forward by the community, some of them requiring very, very little input from council. And yet we are asking them to wait to do anything until the 1st of July 2024. Because until they get council approval, they haven't got a viable project. And I think, how community focused is that? That is not. That's about our processes and our budgets. And I think I would like to see in each community project that comes forward would be an assessment by council staff that could say, this is asking for this amount of money, only, $1,000 from us or $5,000 for us. And council, one of our decisions could be, yes, it has to wait to the LTP process, or we could approve this because we've set aside a certain amount of money, but it would be unbudgeted this year. What I would be proposing in the LTP that's coming up, we would also put in a fund that for 24-25 we can actually approve projects during the year instead of people having to wait a whole year before they can kick their projects off. So what I would like to see in this paper coming back from staff is an expansion of what they've talked about that talks about that community component, and that we could perhaps, could we look at some projects that were, say, needing less than $5,000 from us to kick ahead? It would still be our prerogative to do so. So that's what I'm just talking about. This year, between now and the 1st of July 2024, under the LTP process, none of these projects can go ahead. They can't even go and get funding from other groups because we haven't approved their project. That's the way I'm looking at it, and that's what concerns me. So I would like this item to lay on the table, come back to the next meeting with an expansion and greater discussion so we can actually make a decision on this based on some more thought and information. That's enough for me.
Thank you.
Point of clarification, are you putting A on the table or the entire 5.1?
I'm asking it to be laid on the table.
For 5.1 or for A?
Excuse me, through the chair, please. The point of this item is to obtain clarification in the process, and it is either unbudgeted items are allowed to go forward and decided on, or they just follow this process of going forward to the long-term plan. There is an option there to actually make a decision on the particular one of the Waitangi Park. I would suggest that if this comes back, that no further discussion takes place on it at this point in time. So I'll put a motion that this item lie on the table. Is there a mover for that, please? Deputy Mayor Helen, is there a seconder? Councillor Ross. Those in favour, please say aye.
I normally have discussion with you.
No.
No, okay.
Please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. We'll move to the next item. Presentations. I'll just ask the Pūtiki Emergency Group to come to the table, please. So, welcome Tanya, Kānui, Purapi, and Chris. We have distributed your presentation, and there's 20 minutes. And can you allow for questions there? You can either speak for 10 minutes and allow 10 minutes for questions, or if you want to speak for a bit longer, do so. But we've got to come to a conclusion in 20 minutes. Thank you.
Ka pai. Nama inui ki a koe anaru, te kai autu o tēnei waka me nā kai oi tautoko, nama inui ki a koutou katoa. No e mātou, anei nā mokopuna o te paku o te rangi, ko Pūtiki Waranui a tātou tūranga waiwai, engari ka wakapapa o ki mātou ki era atu apu mai te kaui maunga ki Tangaroa, ko mātou te awa, ko te awa ko mātou, nō reira tēnā koutou katoa. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tanya Bailey, and we are Pūtiki Emergency Response Group. This is my cousin, Piripi Huala, and Kānui Kupa, who instigated this group, and also Chris Shenton, who is here as our Apu representative. So I'm going to talk about Pūtiki Emergency Response Group first, and then I'll hand over to my cousin Chris, who will talk about the wider issues that we've put into our submission. And no doubt my cousins will want to participate in the questions at the end. So we're all born and bred in Pūtiki, and I think all of us in this room can acknowledge the significance of the heritage and cultural significance of Pūtiki. I think we've probably all stayed there as children on school trips. Perhaps you've been sworn in there as a new councillor or mayor. Needless to say, Pūtiki is in the hearts of Whanganui, and Pūtiki is considered Whanganui's marae. So some background is that Pūtiki community was nominated as a community at risk from climate adaptation has been working with Deep South, which you'll probably all be aware of, as the Whanganui District Council was involved in this nomination. So it was at one of these community hui in May that the community decided that Pūtiki needed to have its own emergency response. So this group was formed with the aim of building community resilience and preparedness for any emergency, but particularly for flooding. So this group represents all of Pūtiki, and we're a community-driven initiative. Adequately resourced, we believe that we can provide immediate strategies and resourcing for local emergency management, including refreshing the Civil Defence Emergency Response Plan, training a group of first responders in civil defence emergency management, and a resource container with emergency equipment located in Pūtiki. We're currently working collaboratively with our apu, marae and community, and our key stakeholders include Ngā Tangata Tiaki, Whanganui District Council, Horizons Regional Council, Civil Defence, Police District Commander, plus many others. And we are really fortunate to be aligned with Tama Upoko community-led team, who are sharing their wealth of experience with us in their emergency preparedness plan up the Whanganui Awa. So this slide here is the why we need to do something. And I think with Cyclone Gabrielle fresh in our minds, planning and preparedness is essential. So this slide shows the comments that, that's feedback from a community hui that we had in May. And it also shows, the picture shows the Ngatarua catchment converging into Pūtiki. We also have the Awarua catchment that converges into Pūtiki, but that's a little further over by State Highway 3 and Wikitoria Road. So the Ngatarua catchment covers just over 200 hectares and the Awarua covers 1,100 hectares. That grey, purpley area, shaded area in the middle is the middle of Pūtiki Drive, and this essentially becomes the retention dam in any raining event. That's also where our Kaumatua flats are located, so they're the most elderly population in Pūtiki, and they're currently living in anxiety and fear of the next rain event. The red dotted line along, you can just see that there, that's the 200-year flood in between the awa and the purple bits. So we haven't had a 200-year flood yet. 2015 was classified as 130. But as you can see, that will envelop most of the lower streets in Pūtiki. And I think that we can safely assume if there's a big awa event happening, it'll also be happening in our catchments. So this will essentially block off Pūtiki, State Highway 3 and State Highway 4. If those catchments are also involved, then we can probably assume that all the other catchments in Whanganui are impacted, the Matarawa, etc., etc. So civil defence will be stretched to their capacity. Pūtiki needs its own emergency response. It's probably also important to point out that the two flooding events we have had this year have been from the catchments, the Awarua and the Ngatarua, not from the Awa. So there's two issues that pertain to our submission. The first one is improving the emergency preparedness in the short term, and that's what Pūtiki Emergency Response Group is concerned with. We don't want to compete or replace anything, but rather we want to complement and support the existing civil defence emergency management plan. The second issue is building adaptation and resilience in the medium to long-term game. And this issue involves a much wider collaborative approach between mana whenua, council, other responsible agencies, and a commitment from council and those agencies to fund further evidence to reduce exposure and climate risk for Pūtiki. And Chris will touch on this after I've finished my kōrero. So what are the benefits of this project? This will complement the wider civil defence emergency response and build capacity for Whanganui. If Pūtiki's okay, then Pūtiki Emergency Response Group can be deployed to assist elsewhere. It's all about community preparedness and resilience and connecting our community together, and there's actually potential for more. This aligns with the Council's strategic aspirations, and this project is mana motuhaki in action. This is a community determining what they need and seeking to develop relationships with local government and stakeholders. It's through the strengthening of these relationships that we can build an enduring emergency plan that's likely to be implemented by our community. So what are we asking of Council? So our tono to Council. So Pūtiki Emergency Response Group, we need to be resourced, and that's around resourcing a container, generator, PPE, and we need to build people capability. It's likely we'll need an annual contingency fund, and this is to maintain and replenish equipment and to keep the team operationally capable. And we'd like to work with you on the long-term planning business case as well. If we're looking at the bigger picture, really this is about a commitment to including Pūtiki in the long-term plan, working with Apu and the community and all those responsible agencies collaboratively and looking at a holistic plan for Pūtiki moving forward. And we're aware that the Council's not responsible for all the issues that we've identified, but we ask that you direct these onto the responsible agencies to include in their long-term planning. Nō reira, kua mutu tēnei kōrero mō tēnei wā, kua hoatu te rākau ki taku tūnani. I'm just going to hand over to my cousin Chris now, who's going to have a little kōrero on that bigger picture.
Kia ora tātou. When we had our hui in May, the sort of origins of our process was to really talk about climate adaptation. But when we had that hui, it was like about 3 days after one of the floods that we've just had at that time. And whilst it engendered a fantastic turnout at our hui and a lot of our people came along, there was anxiety in the room. And when we were talking initially about medium to long-term matters around climate adaptation and resilience, some of our whānau who were in the harm's way were rightly concerned and heightened with emotionally about it as they faced the water lapping at their doors, so to speak. So that's where I think the project or the work we're doing is clearly moving into work streams around resilience and emergency response, which is seen as the thing that can be addressed, needs to be addressed early and quickly, and then the medium to long-term stuff, which is more around our, starting to build relationships and work with all the stakeholders that Tani has outlined earlier. So, in terms of firstly, PERG, or the Pūtiki Emergency Response Group, is a recently established initiative that has some ambitions to of course, further establish that. And whilst we're in this early stage, our existing entities that we have in Pūtiki, which are our marae, we have some other trusts that are linked with our hapu entities, and then there's also our church as well, establishment in Pūtiki, which has a significant part to play in the community. But the marae and what have you is supportive of this initiative as a stakeholder, of course, in the broader long-term and medium-term initiatives, and supports this initiative. So that's first and foremost. What we want to do with the more medium and long-term things is build our relationships as mana whenua and with council in order for us to face what's coming at us in terms of climate change. We don't know all the answers to what that's going to be, but we want to be able to integrate our initiative with the council and the other stakeholders as well, because it's not just the responsibility of Whanganui District Council. I was involved several years ago with the 2015 aftermath, and a lot of good work was done, particularly around the Awarua stream. This is with Horizons as well. But there is somewhat of a lack of some data around Ngātaurua in particular. And, you know, we need to keep building on that. That's one thing we want to be able to see getting resourced, you know, whether, and again, we'll be talking to Horizons as well on this front, down the track. So, yeah, we want to fund that information and analysis that's needed to plan to reduce the community's exposure to climate risk. Of course, we also uphold Te Awa Tupua, and of course, Te Heke Nahuru is fresh in our minds, I hope, from last Friday. We hope we're all taking it on board. But, you know, this is to do with a modus, a way of operating whereby in Pūtiki we have tangata whenua and hapu at place, and we also have our community at place. So it's got the features of both, all of the tupua te kawa. So we're very much looking to be a hapu that picks that up and utilises that moving forward. And then, yeah, that's pretty much me, I think. Yeah, kia ora tātou. I'll be open for questions, I guess, as the next stage.
Yeah, thank you. Perhaps I could ask one to start with. And you'll be aware that council has a emergency management team in place, and it's highly recognised across the country as being very, very efficient and very knowledgeable and very helpful. So have you had discussions with the emergency management team in council?
Yes, we have. Yes. We've had a couple of hui with Tim Crow and Anton. Anthony, over probably the last couple of months. So we've engaged with what developing our civil defence plan looks like from a community, what that they've sort of supported us, saying that we need to take that on board and develop with them, but from within our community, and talking about what our resources may look like if we're to sort of co-implement what they do, knowing that they're very stretched. So, yeah, we've had discussions.
So there is a civil defence plan in place for Pūtiki. Have you got concerns about that plan?
We're just refreshing it and engaging with the wider community. I think there is one in place. We just feel that we can do better. Yeah, and get that. So, like for example, this Sunday we're having a community day to engage with the whole of Pūtiki, not just some of all stakeholders and all those community wide. So, to see what their expressions are and their concerns. So. And who is in our community that can layer up into developing this plan. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mayor Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, Kanui, sorry I didn't come in the other day to grab me, but I'm coming on Sunday or whenever it is. Yeah. So first question is, so just writing on what Rob said actually, I'm interested in the immediate response. Just so we had a weather event next week.
Yes.
You said that you think you can do better, and there's been plenty of experience at Pūtiki on weather events. But is the plan good enough to get you through from now to 30 June next year, when whenever the next event happens in the shorter term?
We don't believe that the plan could be better. We've found some holes, and it's no reflection on the current CDME plan, but just living in the community and talking to those others that were affected in May, we could just do a whole lot better by resourcing ourselves and training up people in our area that could respond and enable the the civil defence to go elsewhere. Maybe, yeah, they're quite stretched.
Okay, so without this request, do you have the do you need some help in the meantime to help to ramp up that more tactical plan? In other words, what you've got here is more of a longer term approach and a more resilient approach and sustainable approach for the longer term with Pūtiki in mind. But if there's an immediate event, this doesn't account for that. So are you getting on with it in the meantime anyway, just to get it up to?
Yeah, yes, we are. Yeah. For example, we have an engagement with the CDME team, who is running our first course for responders as volunteers. So we've kicked that off. We've got a few from our community that need to be aware of what that looks like, and that's tonight and Thursday.
Okay.
So we are ramping in. I can touch my phone. I've got 10 people that I can ring that can coexist and help with the flooding that comes this weekend or tonight. So, yeah, we are still moving forward.
Sure.
Where we may be stretched then is around the resources that would enable us to do that safer, and maybe some ongoing training for the responders, because they're all sort of mostly volunteers. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, we're talking about outside of scope of this, but it's just covering off in the meantime. The other question I've got two other questions. Can't read my own writing. At the start you talked about acknowledged Pūtiki was at risk. Was that a formal acknowledgement that Pūtiki was at risk? I mean, we all know that it's in a low-lying area, but is there some formal sort of verification?
It's been acknowledged in all of the reports that have been commissioned through Horizons and the council over the last since 2004. It's clearly acknowledged that Pūtiki is a community at risk, and it was this council that that was part of putting us forward as a nomination to the Deep South team.
Yeah, well, that was my question actually. I saw a long history of in the paper here of that acknowledgement, but here we are nearly 20 years later, and it would appear that there's been acknowledgement but not necessarily an adequate response. Is that correct?
That's correct, and that's why we sort of part of our reason to asking that we are put into the long-term planning, and that is acknowledged. All those reports are acknowledged, and that there is funding put in place to make plans, evidence-based plans to support our community.
So if I could clarify that, it's acknowledge and formalise via the long-term plan. Would that be fair? Because it's been acknowledged, but what you want to do is formalise it.
No action.
Formalise. Yeah.
Okay, great. Last question is, you've been working with and I applaud your collaboration as well, but have you taken a Te Ao Māori, Mataronga Māori approach to this as well? I'm assuming you have, but there's a lot of wisdom up the Awa and all through the Awa around weather, and so just wondering if that's been considered.
That's where we're working with Tama Upoko, community-led trust. Also, the Tupua Te Kawa comes into that Mātauranga Māori approach as well, not being able to separate the tributaries from the Awa and the impact to the Awa. So, yes, I would say as Apu and Mana Wenua, we are taking that approach as well.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, and as we're looking towards the more medium to long-term stuff around, we historically know where the wetlands and things were historically,
that's right.
and whether there's, and of course we know the routes that the streams used to take. Of course, they're not on the original route anymore. Many of them, they've been diverted, and the establishment of the highway and things like that was where the streams used to go. Now, so that's would have taken in a lot of water, if you know what I mean. But now it's all different. So all those things about how things were before and how they are now, and the impacts thereof.
But there isn't a report. There's no report that actually looks at the historical hydraulics of those catchment areas, and there probably should be.
Yeah, well, that was kind of my point, and I spoke with had a quite a long korero with Jill Sheehy, and she was telling me the sound of the rain, we can tell what's going to happen. So that's my point. So hopefully that will be documented as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Helen.
Thank you, kia ora. Part of your discussions with your community, do they talk about perhaps more longer term moving?
Yeah, well, that's part of that medium to long term kōrero and discussion is, do we need to look at a managed retreat?
Good.
And how that would look like, because we know that all of that that low-lying area along the Awa down Takarangi, there's a lot of erosion there as well. It's also a high liquefaction area, so that's definitely needs to be factored into kōrero.
Yeah. Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to add, part of our community we've had Kritso with us as well, And so, yeah, I mean, Critso's pretty frank about these things, so they come through pretty clearly. And so, you know, we're left in no uncertain terms about the predicament of some of where our people reside.
Thank you, thank you. And just for your information, the Ministry of Heritage and Culture are putting aside a big chunk of their efforts into identifying Māori cultural sites that are at risk from climate change. So that's part of their program at the moment. So either through this council, through our heritage officer, or yourselves, a direct contact with them may get that you supercharged to get on the list, and who knows, funding may follow through that avenue. Just thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Michael.
Kia ora. I will put this as a question, sorry. I struggle with this a little bit because I like it, and then in other ways I'm like, how would it work? And so my question to you is, will you follow the civil defence processes and guidelines? Yeah, good. Yeah, that was my, I don't know how to say that.
The plan is being refreshed with civil defence and the police district commander as well. So, yeah,
Nice.
with everyone who it's supposed to.
Because I remember us being told the problem in massive events is people doing their own thing, and then they
Yeah.
get stuck, and yeah.
That's what we're trying to get away from.
Yeah, yeah. So
That's what's been happening.
I agree.
Strategy that keeps everyone safe.
Can I make a comment? Sorry, you obviously haven't heard from me yet, but I just want to sort of bring some context to Kānoi's comment in terms of we can do things better than what this current emergency response plan exists in Pūtiki. That's not really, we're not trying to do things better. We are an emergency group that's going to complement it. So the plan is good, but we need to complement it because one of the situations that we currently face is that it's all well and good having a plan, but it's people to carry out that plan, to carry out the evacuation, to be the first responders who understand what they need to do, have the resources to be able to be effective in that role. So that's what we're trying to do as a community group, is create that emergency responder group initially. The long-term stuff is something that will come into this as we move forward.
No, that makes total sense to me. Do we have a total cost estimation yet?
Well, it's still, the budget is evolving, but, you know, but we have slashed 5,000 off it this week as, you know, we've talked to Civil Defence about training. So they've offered to do training, psychological and first aid. So that slashes 5,000. But we're looking at around 70,000 to have a fully equipped container with everything that we need, plus a generator.
And that was my next question, was total cost versus ongoing cost. I would presume ongoing cost is training, which I'm presuming we can get.
We can get that for free. But I mean, it might be that we need $1,000 contingency fund each year to replenish equipment or for that ongoing training or to keep that team operationally capable.
I wasn't exactly sure that meant. Thank you for that. With regards to Pūtiki Hall in the centre of the emergencies, has there been a feasibility study done on that yet? Or is it something you're looking to do?
We're like the Pūtiki Parish Hall, and they are one of our stakeholders, would be a temporary type holding evacuation space because actually it's been identified as the only building that will probably survive a 200-year flood, but we're not sure. And so we are looking at other sites and talking with different businesses along Pūtiki and Civil Defence about where would be the best place to have a container with all the emergency equipment in. But the Parish Hall would not be a Civil Defence hub.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. As you're aware that Council has a substantial budget for emergency management, so I think it would be appropriate if the Chief Executive could perhaps finish this presentation with some comments about our commitment to that.
Through you, Chair, I think maybe just for the benefit of some of our newer elected members, I just wanted to make a couple of comments around the alignment this request has with the overall contraption of civil defence, because I actually see this as being a really good thing. From a civil defence point of view, I'm a trained controller. A lot of our executive teams are also trained controllers, and what you want in an emergency is a community that is well prepared to be able to stand and respond on their own. And actually the best way we can grow our civil defence capability is not to build more into council, but actually to get in behind community groups so that they can build their own preparedness, so that they can look after themselves during an event. And certainly looking to Marae as those centres within the community that can become welfare centres, operation centres, and can help support the wider civil defence team, coordinate the response to the community. It's well done across the country, and it's a model that we should probably look to replicate. So hopefully I'm not speaking out of turn by sounding like I'm endorsing a particular project over any of the other projects in the community, but wanted to give you some assurance that what's been asked for dovetails very, very well into the overall civil defence framework and the civil defence legislation. It's actually trying to do what we should be doing really, really well.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Probably made a comment there before that it's people to carry out the plan that's really important, and that's why it's great to see the community coming forward to council saying, you know, we're all in this and we've got some help if and when the occasion arises. Thank you. Thank you. Next presentation is the Rural Halls Trust. Good
afternoon.
Good afternoon, Richard.
Yes, I'll introduce myself. My name is Richard White. I'm here on behalf of the Rural Halls along with David Wells from the Community Rural Board. My background, I am a Maxwell resident for some 62 years. I've now seen the light and moved into the city, but I've still got the connection obviously with the Rural Halls. What I thought I'd do today, and we do have two submissions today, and I don't know whether you want me to back them or not, but
yes.
Yeah, I thought you might. What I might do first then is to just run through a brief history and then move on from there. And we go back to 1999, and the council formed a task force to investigate the viability of our community halls. And I note on the minutes back then they consulted with the communities, and Councillor Vincent was involved back then, and I commend you for your long service to the district. You've aged a bit better than me, but it's good to see that there's still the connection there. And I don't know whether you recall that time, but there were 8 submissions put forward, or 8 options, sorry, put forward around what was going to happen with their community halls, and most of them were not favourable. Selling the halls, removing the halls were a number of the options. Obviously, the community response to that was no way. So we presented to the council, and we were successful. And hence, in 2010, the Rural Halls Trust was formed, and we were tasked with maintaining and improving our halls. They comprised of the 7, which are Maxwell, Kaiwi, Mawhanau, Rapanui Mawhanau, Akuia, Fordell and Mangamahu. And it'd be fair to say that since then the feedback from the community has been fantastic. One thing we argued at the time was, and the point that was often that was put out was that the halls were not being used on a regular basis. We argued that to us that didn't matter. Their historic significance to the communities was very material. Some of them were actually are actually memorials. Some are used more than others. Kaiwi, for instance, is next to the school and it's used on a regular basis. Rapanui Mawhanau is, as everyone will know, it gets a lot of use. So, and over the period of this, since 2010, the hall use has increased, and the fact that they're there has often engaged the communities to start up activities like fitness groups, etc., that sort of thing. So, so they've been beneficial, as I say. The feedback has been great. The trust was set up with a budget of 520,000, which was to be and was allocated for a 10-year period. We received $52,000 plus GST on each 12-month period. At the time when we started, we didn't know what we were up for. We were given a maintenance budget prepared by the property division of the council at the time, and off we went. We now know, looking back, that maybe the 52,000 was a little bit shy at the time, but we still persevered on, and we have maintained the halls to the degree where they've been repainted, re-roofed where it's been needed. It's still ongoing though. Within that 52,000, we also provide each hall with a grant for internal maintenance. I've started out at $1,200, increased to $1,500, and now sits at $1,800. As a trust, we deem that we are responsible for the exterior, although we have at times contributed toward interior renovations, such as we've upgraded the lighting in all the halls to LED, just as an example. What we didn't anticipate in 2010, which was a year before the Christchurch earthquake, was earthquake-prone buildings. We were more maintenance focused, I would say, less about capital, and this has thrown up a bit of a curveball for us, I guess you could say. Fort Earl Hall is an earthquake-prone building. At a particular stage, we realised that we were up for something significant in this respect financially, and so we started to put aside funds from our grant as a form of large project fund. So we didn't actually put it in any particular area, we just held it as a cash surplus, so that it was shown as a cash surplus. And we have used some of that fund for some large capital projects, like the Mangamahu Hall had an earthquake issue around the chimney. So the chimney was unused, so we had the chimney demolished and redecorated. We have also, just excuse me, let's check the notes. Oh, sorry, that's right. The significance of this proposal to talk to the annual grant was highlighted recent in our last budget, our last year, of the insurance premium. And when we first started out the trust, the council was actually insuring the buildings, and we discovered that the council was carrying a $150,000 excess. So we were exposed in that respect. So we took over the responsibility of insuring the buildings, and we used the model of the Moston School Hall as an ideal replacement if we had a total loss. When we took out that insurance, the premium was 21% of our annual budget. Last year, the premium is 32% of our budget. Last year, we took a voluntary increase on the value of the replacement value. We decided not to get a valuation because we were worried that the valuation would actually be higher than taking the voluntary lift, and then it would become a disclosure, and we'd have to disclose that to the insurers, and our premium could be even higher. But the realities are we are going to have to revalue the halls, and that will increase the premium. So it's eating into our budget. Since 2010, the CPI has increased by 35.8%. I'm a real estate agent. In the year 2000, the median average house price in Whanganui was 76,000. At the moment, 20-something years later, is varying either side of 500,000. So we're the buzzword apart from climate change at the moment in this country is inflation. That cost of living is an enemy for us as well. Our large projects fund, we've managed to get it to a level of around $100,000 now. We have received some support from the Heritage Fund toward the costs that we are deeming as large projects. So with identifying the Fordell Hall earthquake strengthening, we used some of that large project funds to commission an investigation into what was required. So we employed BPL engineers to assess the building. It was deemed to be 15% of NBS. We want to get it up to 67%. So we've spent the money on that. We do have additional costs at the Fordell Hall outside of the earthquake strengthening, doors and windows, which is a further 35,000. We've just received an application from the Rapanui Hall for us to consider a $17,000 upgrade at that hall, Maxwell Hall. Even though all the feedback has been highly positive, we have had some constructive feedback, I would say, and Maxwell Hall does have a real safety issue around parking, but we do have a large area behind the hall which can be developed into a car park, so we've got a $22,000 quote sitting on the table for that as well. You know, these halls, and talking about Maxwell Hall, they have been going right back to farewelling soldiers going off to the Second World War. My uncle was one of those. They've also had momentous occasions such as the debate around the renaming of Maxwell to Karakia and the community meetings that were held there, which were pretty passionate sort of meetings. And more recently, we just had the William Birch Reserve meeting there, which some of the councillors who are here and the mayor was actually there as well. So these halls definitely are an asset to our community, and in some cases the last bastion standing. I don't know what else Mangamahu has got now, but the hall is certainly an icon in that area. And I recently took a photographer around all our halls to just to record how they are, and I said to him at the end of it, of all the halls, which one would you rate your best? And he just without hesitation said Mangamahu. Yep. The character, and like there's photos in there with black and white photos in there with ladies with long flowing dresses down into the mud, and they go back to pre-1900. So
I could put one more comment in about Mangamahu. After the Tangiwai disaster, it was used as a morgue. There were bodies lined up on Boxing Day, 1953. So there's a bit of interesting history for you.
So just to summarise, and I'm sure there's probably questions around this, we're applying for the annual grant to be increased to $80,000 plus GST, but we'd also like a formula put in place. So our first, as I said, we started in 2010. Our first increase from 52,000 wasn't for another 8 years, and then it's increased progressively up to where we're now sitting at 65,000. As I say, we felt that in hindsight now the 52,000 was a slow start, and we need to adjust accordingly. We've proposed that maybe every 3 years a CPI alignment for the adjustment to the grant to formalise it.
Thank you.
So, any questions?
Yeah. Thank you, Richard.
Sorry, David.
Just,
David.
make one comment here is
Just move the microphone.
I've been
over.
a trustee since I was elected to the community board, so that's 7 years. And so I'm able to look in from the outside a little bit. And my view is that this is an extremely well-run, the group running this are dedicated, and the halls are immaculate, and they've achieved, in my view, an incredible amount with a very modest amount of money. So my summary is that the system we have here is working extremely well.
Can I also add, can I also add that a correction to my application, there are actually 3 rural community board representatives. They are extremely diligent. They just about 100% attendance, which is fantastic, and they are our report card. So they are our internal auditors, I guess, as representatives of the ratepayers. So anyway, I'll let you ask.
Thank you. Well, we'll open it up for questions. My first question, perhaps Mike Fermor might be able to answer. Mike, is the Rural Halls grant funded from the rural rate?
Sorry, I'll have to get back to you on that one.
Okay. Thank you. Deputy Mayor Helen, did you have a question?
Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks for all your hard work. So applying for funding grants, do you actually do applications for funding grants to, like, Four Regions Trust, etc.?
So we haven't to date. We have built up a cash surplus, but that is definitely our plan, and that's within our terms within the trust. So that is we've had funding from the Heritage Fund of $10,000 toward the BPL investigative report for the earthquake strengthening. But yes, we do. And look, we also acknowledge that the funding that the council may consider for the earthquake strengthening of the hall may not be for some time, because this is the long-term plan. But at least having that surety means that we can then look at, we've got the power to borrow money or go out and apply for other grants. The significant thing, and it was when I met with Sarah O'Hagan, the significant thing about the Fordale Hall, and I am jumping onto the next subject here, is in 2020 we had an estimate on the earthquake strengthening, and that was, and then again we reviewed it, and it jumped up over $52,000 just in that short period of time. Our annual grant only went up about $2,500, so we don't want to lose the momentum. Well, we need to keep on top of it. We're concerned that this will blow out. So, but having the confidence that the council can back us, I guess, will mean we can go out and source funds from another area, or dare we say it, borrow, but we don't really want to borrow with interest rates where they are at the moment. And we've been successful up till now by generating a surplus, and we do want to continue doing that.
Thank you. There's just 2 questions now. One from Mayor Andrew. Thank you.
Yeah, first of all, I'll get to the question, but first of all, thank you for all the work you're doing. I only discovered last week that there was indeed a Rural Community Halls Trust, so thank you, Richard, for that. We've got a lot of things that council have got their hands in, and this is one of them. So, and also the concept of community, I think, is going to be more and more important, particularly with rural communities. They're more isolated, and the town halls are, well, community halls, I should say, are I think, icons of our past and should continue in the future in some format. And we also are urban and rural, as I remind people on the camera from time to time, and wherever we go. Whanganui District Council is urban and rural, so it's great that we've got a community rural representation here. Question is, I think you alluded to it before and may not have got the full answer, but other grants, I mean, for example, the Heritage Trust, Heritage, And are there other ways of, other means of finding or getting grants from central government or other means?
We do intend to pursue that.
Okay.
Yep,
Great.
absolutely.
The other one is, are there, so what about Upakanaro Hall? Is that considered a city one, or is that just not part of this trust?
So we have been approached by the council. That was back a few years ago, to see if we'd be prepared to take it on, which we did say yes we would. Apparently it was to be earthquake strengthened before we took it on. I gather that's been slightly shelved in the meantime. There is a need for it to be done. There is some community consultation to go on as well. We did go out and have a look at the hall, or one or two of us did, sorry, and we were greeted by a dead possum inside the door, so it definitely needs some sort of early intervention, and we're more than happy to take it on.
Sarah can probably give you an update on that, if you're...
Well, that's why I specifically asked about Upakanaro Hall. Yep. There may be others, because by talking to that community, it's an issue. So the other question I've got is other rural hall models around New Zealand. I mean, I'm just thinking, have you explored is there a New Zealand rural community halls trust or something like that oversee? I'm just thinking, my question around that is, it's good to pinch and borrow what others are doing in regard to approaching funding and also maintenance and use of community halls.
Yeah, look, we're open-minded. One initiative we did put in place in 2020 was we appointed a maintenance manager, and so his task is to go around 3 times a year and inspect all the halls, and if he can fix the problem on the spot, he'll do that. If he can't, if he needs to engage a contractor, he will. So that's been one of the initiatives that we adopted. We're not so complacent that we are going to sit back. We've recognised that we do have to up our game a bit. We've got old buildings that are obviously in need of maintenance. That's the whole reason why we were set up, and they're getting older. These buildings go back some, before the turn of before 1900. So yes, look, we definitely are. We've got great expertise within our committee, and we intend to take advantage of that. In answer to your question about urban, or not answer, but just to go on about the connection between urban and lifestyle, when in 1987, when I was farming and SMPs came off, farming got pretty tough. I was getting $15 for a lamb, it went down to $9 overnight. So farmers had to find a way of surviving. Dare say it's sort of starting to sound like the same story now, but one of the things they did do was they laid off staff, and then they had surplus houses on these farms, which they turned into lifestyle blocks, and town came out to country and lived in these lifestyle blocks. So we have got that urban connection, but unfortunately what they did was they carried on their jobs in town, and so they took their kids to school in town. And so then the schools, because the farms had de-staffed, also it closed the schools down. So now all we've got left are our halls and our churches and our swimming pools, our reserves, and that's about all we've got left. So that's why, and sorry, this is just a statement more than anything, the importance of what we've got. Some of them are memorial halls, some of them have memorials in them because there's nowhere else to put them.
Thank you. We are running out of time now, so I can only take one more question. That's from Councillor Glenda.
Thank you. Apart from Fordell, do you foresee any of the other halls that sit under your umbrella as needing earthquake strengthening or coming up to that stage? No?
We think that probably Brunswick is the only one, but it's a wooden hall, and just with our experience, we don't anticipate to be at the level Fordell Hall is. So But yeah, we're doing one step at a time. We've got till 2035, but that's why we're starting now, even though it's a fair way off. But yeah, that's the only other one. The rest, we understand are all okay. Yeah. The Fordale Hall, which is the, and I understand we're running out of time, but the Fordale Hall, we're looking at 181,500 for the earthquake strengthening bill there.
Yeah.
And we're looking from the council for to consider an $85,000 contribution towards that. And as I said earlier, as a backstop for us, it'd be nice to have it there, but also give us the comfort that we can either go out and borrow or get the project underway is the key, so that 85,000 doesn't blow out to double.
Okay, well, that's the next item, and you've given an introduction to it, Richard. It's the earthquake strengthening and the upgrade of the Fordale Hall. So can you just add anything that you want there, and then I'll open it up for questions again.
Probably at the end of the day, it was just that recognition that we came to the realisation that you can't be complacent, that 2035, which is the deadline, or the target, is a long way off. And so we have built up this large project fund, but and still been prudent about our maintenance for the halls. So we haven't compromised our halls, but we feel that we have to contribute. If we contribute, then we can put up a good case for applying to other forms of funding to come on board. But that does impact on our annual grant and how we apply that. So we do see a lot of merit in outsourcing as much more of this large capital projects as opposed to us holding and accumulating funds. But we still feel that obviously we it's part of our contribution. I think that's probably just a few questions, to be honest.
Okay, then, Richard.
Yeah.
Deputy Mayor Helen.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you again. So I'm trying to figure out the numbers here, but to fund the earthquake strengthening and repair to the windows, you've already got 10,000 from the council's heritage fund, and you've got 100,000 in the bank. So the balance you're looking for from council for 85,000, or up to 85,000. Is that the way I'm reading that correctly?
Yes, we deem the doors and the windows to actually be our responsibility as our maintenance.
Okay.
We have actually priced those up as aluminium windows, but in talking to Scott Flutie, he suggested that we just revisit that and keep it within the character of the building, and there may be some heritage funding by doing that. So so we could reduce that by.
What's the age of that building?
It's 1926.
Oh yeah. And have you sought advice on whether or not you could apply to Lottery's heritage grant fund?
No, we haven't.
Okay, so they've got another funding round in about, I think it's February, and if for the right heritage buildings, they will fund up to 65%, as long as you've already got support funding, which you already have, because you've got your 100,000 and your 10,000. So I think you need to look at that, but talk to Scott Flutie about whether or not you'd be eligible, rather than having to wait for council to come on for the balance. I think that's an option for you, possibly an option for you.
Yep, yeah, that's good. I guess I don't know the process, and someone may be able to help, but if we apply in February and it's approved, are we going to be another year down the track?
No, they approve and it takes them about 3 or 4 months, but I mean, you're not going to get anything from us until the 1st of July 2024 at this rate anyway.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's one of the best funders out there.
Yep.
As well as the pub charities, etc. Like, I think you should be chasing all those down now.
That's definitely is it's actually in our agenda for our meeting on Thursday. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Yes, I was there in 2010 when the mayor of the time, Michael Laws, wanted to sell your organisation all the rural halls for $1, and you take it all over. But fortunately, there was a champion there in Councillor Don McGregor, who was a great champion of the rural halls, and I think you've done a wonderful job since then for the rural community with a pretty tight budget. So well done. So there's no more questions. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Good. Right. Well, we're right on time, so please come to the presenters table. Robin, Graham, Eddie. In your hands. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Rob. I just thought I'd cover off 3 key points that we've tried to get across in our submission, and then we'll be open for questions around the table. So the first one was that we're not after capital funding for a path or any building or something. We're looking for funding for operations of environment base. Secondly, we encourage and want to support the council to take on elements of the waste that maybe are not tackled at the moment. So that are things we think are in the waste hierarchy of above recycling, so the repurposing, the reusing, those sorts of areas we'd like to see, and we'd like to be involved in projects in that area and community education and participation. Thirdly, leading from that, we think we've got the opportunity to offer you a super environment centre, probably operating on these operational costs of about $200K a year, but you'd in fact get it for a bargain price of 50 or 60 because we already belong to Environment Aotearoa, which brings in anything 40 to 50,000. That's government funding money. They have 1.25, 2.6, 1.26 currently of government funding, which is going to 22 environment centres, and we're one of those. So we think we're putting that into the Wanganui, and we're also really good at getting other grants like from lotteries and so on. So the 3, and also they provide a lot of support for us in monthly staff meetings, hui's, visits to other centres and so on. So we think that's a real resource that we bring to Wanganui. So that's the 3 key points we think we're bringing to the table today. Happy to expand on those and answer questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Perhaps I could ask one then, Graham. When we visited a transfer station in Warkworth, there was 2 people going through the refuse that was tipped there, and they were extracting or diverting 40% of what came through that transfer station into either repurposing or reselling or recycling. Is that the sort of thing that you would be wanting to get involved in?
So that certainly should be happening here in Wanganui. But our main aspiration at this time is an environment centre where where repurposed items would be made available. So it's like a retail outlet for those recovered items.
Yep.
We currently have what we call our Reuse Academy, which
brings us in about $150 a week. So we're already kind of operating in that space. I'm sure it would grow with a environment centre that's more inviting for the public.
Well, that small recycling centre and the shop associated with it was doing $700 a day. So that's what the demand is.
Rob?
I think Mayor Andrew was first.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, look, I'm a bit rusty on this. I've been to the site, but I thought there's already an education program going on and other initiatives already underway. Are you looking just to ramp up what you're already doing, or is that what the Enviro Hub's about?
There's two parts to the Resource Recovery Centre,
Yep.
and we're one of the tenants, and they at the moment provide, prior to COVID, they were providing the education part of it.
Right.
We would like to pick up that 15,000 and do that job as well.
Gotcha. So it's them that have been doing the education piece.
Yes.
Not you. Okay.
So
that's I just didn't know. I wasn't sure how that worked.
Yeah, and we see the time now is probably where the opportunity for us to shift to somewhere more central in town, because obviously some changes are going to happen to the Resource Recovery Centre. The building may go, tenants may change and so on. So we've been looking for all through this year for another site and visiting that we'd probably be asked to move on.
Fantastic. Great. I did make a note before I got to the point about available online about a virtual hub as well, but it looks like you've already addressed that, because there are different ways you can get to people, particularly young people. So online is really important, I think, here, and also going to the community as well. I got a real refill at the markets the other day of dishwashing liquid, I think it was, and spray, and so taking the Enviro Hub to the people as well, is that something also on your mind?
We certainly have a social media presence at the moment, which we always aim to improve. And the idea of a refill station for eco products is one that we have trialled at the market and also at our office at the Resource Recovery Centre. And in new premises, we're looking to maybe expand that further as well. So there's lots of different ways that we can build a bit more resilience, we think, for the Wanganui citizens. Yeah.
There's been a couple of initiatives that Robin's been involved in with the council in terms of where to recycle things, A to Z. We've also now recently got a map of all the different environmental organisations. We're wanting to add on to that a layer of where you could go foraging and so on. So I think we're very involved in that space that you're talking about.
The thing that can't go online is the green bikes operation, which will be a part of the whole thing. That's an actual practical, hands-on activity.
Deputy Mayor Helen.
Thank you. I think it's getting a bit cold in here.
It is.
Yeah, please.
Turn that off.
Thank you. Maybe it's some further information you can furnish later. I'm just a bit confused by your budget. It's not clear to me, just in this very small submission you've made, where all the money's coming from and going to and what have you. So I just think...
in a nutshell, what we've transitioned since we've had the money coming in from the Enviro Hubs Aotearoa, the government money, we've moved from being volunteer to having 5 part-time staff, and we'd like to build on that because they're doing wonderful things. They're young people doing great stuff for us. So at the moment, we're looking at like 50,000 coming from there. We're getting a lot of money from lotteries and other places, like for Green Bikes, which is currently going out to 8 primary schools as part of your bike program and doing that sort of thing. Other incomes, in that area. So that, and then in that budget, there's some money there that we already have in a couple of accounts. So what I'm suggesting in a round figure is, we could bring in like 100, 150, but we need a bit more if we're going to really make it a super duper thing, doing the education and employing these people more to do the shop type thing that Robin's talked about, Green Bikes that Hattie's talked about,
Right.
Yeah, so we're asking to kind of, and I guess it's just a kind of estimated kind of example of how it fits, because, you know, every year we get different amounts from different projects and different things. So
Absolutely.
we're looking for that base funding that would build on what we're already getting from Ira Hub, so we know we can pay the rent, because if we go into town it'll be a whole lot more than we're paying currently, and we can pay some people to do things.
Okay, thank you. Just really through the chair, probably to the CE, this is quite a short request. You know, like there's not a lot of information here for what is for the ratepayer quite a significant amount of money, because it would be year on year on. So I would want to see a bit more fleshed out business case for it.
Of course.
So I'm just not sure if that's the second phase of all of this. That would follow through naturally, but so I'm just flagging that really.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Philippa.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's probably just following on from Councillor Helen, but so yeah, it says you haven't found a site as yet, but you'd be looking to rent a site, obviously, and that would be part of your total operational costs, but expected to be more than you're paying now. In regard to the waste fund, I'm not sure who could answer that, but I imagine Sustainable Whanganui would have projects that, and has, you know, to my time on there, to make applications to that. Is that would that be correct? Is that how do you see part of your operational income?
Yes, we've got we had an application for a repair CAF, which has been turned down from the community grants, but suggested the area to go would be the waste levy, making it a better fit. So yeah, certainly hoping to do that sort of thing in the future, and have done in the past. Yeah.
Right, thank you. And I guess it's in regard to, you know, particularly around some more capital items or whatever. Obviously, things like Four Regions Trust in particular.
Yeah, we have very good relations with Whanganui Community Foundation, for example, with green bikes. Yeah, it's 5,000 this year from there. And it's been also contributed to the fruit trees in schools project and things. So yeah.
And do you see there might be another similar type of organisation? Is there a place, have you identified anywhere? I mean, I don't know, I'm kind of thinking probably wrongly, Kai Hub or something. That could be where, you know, you could possibly move in with another similar kind of organisation that could possibly help, you know, reduce, you know, the whole thing.
Yeah, certainly open to
reduce some overheads.
Certainly open to that. Kai Hub we've looked at, but it's really the spare area is upstairs, and that doesn't really lend itself to people taking products up and down the stairs and things. Yeah, we've looked at 3 different options so far. We're looking at the 4th at the moment, just trying to find something that fits and is affordable, basically.
And have you identified with council staff around that too, who may be able to?
We've made 2 approaches to council and found no buildings that they could offer us.
Thank you. Thanks very much for what you're doing, the work you're doing.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation. It's entered the process now for the long-term plan, and will be considered at the appropriate time. So
thank you. Yeah, we just thought it was an opportunity to kind of put our hands up and say, hey, we're here.
Good. Yeah, thank you. Look, I'll just, we're right up with time now. We've got the Mountain Bike Club to present next. I'll just take a 5-minute recess. Thank you. about Matapo Park. Welcome to Craig Davey and Britt Bunkley. It's in your court. Thank you.
Afternoon, Councillor, Chair, Mayor and other councillors and staff. Thank you for having the Mountain Bike Club and other users of Matapo Park here today to talk about a project that we'd love to be able to have your involvement in. So I'm Craig Davey. I don't sit on the committee of the Mountain Bike Club, but I am a mountain biker and one of the many members of the Mountain Bike Club that make the club happen. So it's a fantastic club, been around for a long, long time. I was Google searching to see how long it's been around for, but couldn't find it. But mountain biking and Wanganui have gone together since the 90s, pretty much since mountain biking started. So the club would have been around for a long time as well, and Matapo Park has been a big part of that. But not just mountain biking, so Britt Bunkley is here today in support of this LTP submission because Matapo Park is used by many, many different parts of our community. So we're all mugs together in this endeavour. So Matapo User Group was a group that was formed once Matapo Park was closed for public access back in 2017 and 18 to recognise the number of people involved in Matapo from the community, from all walks of life. So walkers, mountain bikers, creatives, and even people that ride horses have been able to use Matapo Park for a while. So, look, I've been in Wanganui since '97. My son and myself mountain bike in many places around the country, and Matapo Park has enabled us to get the love of mountain biking and sport. So today's presentation is pretty much on behalf of the Mountain Bike Club, but with support from the wider Matapo Users Group. So I've got a PowerPoint as sort of requested to put our words into pictures. So obviously, that's not Matapo, but it is well known to Wanganui community people as the Bridge to Nowhere. So just a bit of a slight that we do have our own Bridge to Nowhere, folks, and it sort of looks like that. I've had to tilt that older picture on an angle because that's the current state of our Bridge to Nowhere. And Matapo Park is the nowhere, given that there's no, I suppose you could say, authorised or council endorsed access to the park via Brunswick Road. Not only do you have to cross a slightly leaning bridge, which is noted as a health and safety issue in this application and by council as well, but you have to cross the tracks of doom and dodge two trains a day that have really put Matapo into the no-go zone. So back in 2017, the bridge was identified as potentially being a health risk. And then in talking around how we could solve the bridge, access to Matapo Park was flagged and Kiwi Rail said, oh, this is actually the problem that we need to address. So that's the reason for this LTP discussion, is to build on the work that's happened since 2017 by the District Council. So council officers have been involved in trying to solve the problems of access to Matapo Park alongside with the Matapo Users Group and the Mountain Bike Club, obviously. So why are we worrying about wanting to get into Matapo Park? I don't know if any of you people have been there. I'm assuming you would have, because it's one of the jewels in Wanganui's crowns, if you like being in nature, if you like fitness, if you like exploring. So Matapo Park's 33 hectares of land gifted to the council by the Matapo company back in 1913. You'll see that the blue lines or the blue polygons are dissected or separated by the rail corridor, and that's the issue that is creating the biggest problem for those that would like to be able to access Matapo. So what do you do in Matapo? This is one of the things you do. These are GPS tracks of some of the mountain bike tracks, not all of them. There's one around the perimeter as well, which I didn't GPS because it's too steep. It's hard work, maybe not quite fit enough. But that just shows you that 133 hectare park can provide multiple opportunities, multiple different sorts of riding opportunities for people. Matapo Park, sorry the light's probably not the best in here, but it's not just for the mountain bikers, as you can see. For nature lovers, for what it provides in terms of wild for this city, it's really important. It's got a whole lot of biodiversity. It's got a whole lot of, exotic trees that are well used by that biodiversity. So that's a native falcon's nest in there. As in the discussion document, there's a whole heap of value that sits inside Matapo Park, not just because of what it is, but because of what people can get from it as well. So that seat in memorial for Dr. Chris Creswell, a user of Matapo Park, an example of the value that people achieve or receive from being in there and recreating in there, spending time in there. So it's a muse for some people. It's a place to develop. My son, mountain biking, one of the many uses. Mountain biking, as I mentioned, is a historic part of Wanganui's history with support because of the opportunities that Wanganui provides. We've had national representation, internationally famous riders come from Wanganui because of places like Matapo Park. It's if it's your thing, you understand. If it's not, it's just a hill with some trees on it. But the style of riding, the ability for people to access it for free and use Matapo Park has, from a mountain biker's perspective, been very worthwhile in the development of many fast and nationally recognised riders. One's just come back from Europe, Katie Ramage. Many others are still over in their careers coming from Wanganui. So we hold Matapo Park very dearly. So that's why we like Matapo. That's why the affinity from the community is so strong for Matapo, and when losing access created civil disobedience protagonist, I suppose, people that conduct civil disobedience, because there is still access to Matapo Park through the Westmere Walkway. And this is a screenshot from the District Council's website, which puts the position of Matapo Park pretty clearly to people, that it was closed. The railway line is the safety issue. There's also a bridge that's a bit dodgy, and there is access, so please find your way through farmland with bulls and lambs and mud and slippery steep areas and use the Westmere Walkway as access. So people choose to not use the Westmere Walkway and may still make use of what is, for all intents and purposes, the historic way to get in, and that creates a problem in itself, that even though there are signs there, people still choose to access it, even though there are potential safety requirements not being met. So that's where we're at. That's our current state. How long can that exist is where we're at. So we took heart in the LTP currently, that in year 4, maybe it's a mythical year 4, that there's a bunch of cash in there earmarked for Matapo Park for development. And I'm assuming, given the quantum, it's for either addressing the bridge or a small way to going towards what looks like to be the only option. So as I mentioned, council officers have been involved, and we've had communication through the years with council officers to track progress against why can't we get into the park. And so to the credibility of council, WSP were engaged and put the options for access against the problems that exist, such as the bridge, but primarily the Kiwi Rail matter. And so they met with Kiwi Rail, and we thought, what has changed? You know, since 1913 to 2017, we've had trains and we've had bridges and streams. People have still been able to get across. So what's changed is a heightened sense of safety around level crossings. So no longer can we just have some sort of drafting gate and a sign that says look for trains. We have to have a very long distance of visibility and I suppose even an alarmed or a lit or a controlled level crossing. From feedback from Kiwi Rail was that they would like to formally close the level crossing at Matapo. So any engineering works to open up cliffs or remove vegetation was deemed to be not practical or too expensive, and that meant that the only options were to not engage. So we couldn't go over, could be through the level crossing, could we go over with an overpass? So build a tower and a bridge, and that was looked at actually in the not that long ago by a local engineer, and no, that wasn't going to be as cheap or as probably as suitable an option as an underpass. So WSP back in 2020 explored the level crossing as well as the underpass, and the underpass takes all risk away from trains because you're not having to cross the track, you're going underneath the track. There is an issue with an underpass, and primarily it's cost. So today's discussion is really about dollars. So when we start talking about solutions, it's like we have a solution, but do we have the money for that solution? We're talking of quantums. The money is large. We don't have a costed underpass quoted document to sort of refer to, unfortunately. What WSP did is looked at sort of rounder figures back in 2020. We've had some sort of looser assessments of late because Whanganui is fortunate to have a local supplier of certified underpasses for KiwiRail. So it can happen in a day. It just needs the right equipment to be able to get on site. So it's a bridge problem, whether that's temporary or not. But it still would take in the order of, you know, a couple of $300,000 to enable access to Matapo Park for those that have previously used it and those that may choose to use it. So it's not just a park that can be used for walking. The Mountain Bike Club and Whanganui itself is well versed at running events, and there's many things that Matapo Park can be used for outside its typical use. So in the past it's been used as Masters Games as well, so as a location for various sports. So Matapo Park, when looked at now with the number of people that go there, probably low value, you know, only 20, 30, 50 people actually use it, not on any given day, but over, you know, a period of time. The previous use of Matapo Park was obviously much broader than that when access was open to all manner of people that could get there and wanted to use it. So that's the situation, folks. Can council support the Mountain Bike Club and maybe the wider community's mugs, the Matapo user groups, re-litigation of, is this the forever game? Is Matapo locked up forever? Or what options can we put on the table to explore? Either the expensive one, but it is a one-off cost. How do we spread that over time? Or again, are there alternatives? And to that extent, the Mountain Bike Club have been trying and exhausting all options. We have a mountain bike friendly farmer who may be able to supply their underpass through council land and their farm to access Matapo, but it tends to be mountain bikers only. For some reason, they may be more responsible than other members of the public when talking to farmers around stock access or stock gates and things like that. So we've been trying, but this isn't just for the club, right? So Matapo access for all is what we're after. Not trying to find other alternative ways that only work for a small sector of the community. So I've mentioned up there, you know, it's obviously dollars is a big question. Are there any other alternatives to explore? Is KiwiRail up for, you know, a re-litigation of their current formally closing status? You know, this duty of care for recreational users doesn't apply for workplaces under the PCBU criteria, right? So it's just people having access to a place, but it's KiwiRail, so they're not yourselves. But if the desire from the community is great enough that we could probably look at some other sensible way of getting across the tracks that would be cheaper than the $300,000 or $400,000, then let's explore that. But obviously that's KiwiRail's position that we'd have to argue against. So yeah, so I could talk more, but I do really want to hear what you'd like to know. There are issues around health and safety, obviously, currently with the locked gate and people choosing to access if they're not going to be arriving from somewhere else on bike or foot. They might be parking near the road and creating issues with either theft of their vehicles or reversing into traffic. So it's indicative of the strong desire to use Matapo Park. In most people's minds, you know, they're not the bureaucratic, aware of health and safety requirements that come down on organisations. They're the what's changed, you know, why can't I walk somewhere where I used to when I can't perceive any increased risk. So as a mountain bike club, you know, no formal use in Matapo Park. How other users see that current situation is up to them. But we do know that people are in Matapo Park, so we are allowing the crossing of the tracks, we are allowing the crossing of the bridge at this stage as a community, right?
Thank you, Craig. Yes, I have to admit I haven't visited Matapo Park. Would like to. As a walker, how friendly is it? Because walking in on motorbike motor on bike circuits like that, mountain bike circuits, can be a bit fraught with danger for walkers. If it opened up to more pedestrians, how safe would it be?
Look, it's a really good question. It's actually a topic that St George's had for one of the school projects, which was how to make Matapo great again. And so that was when school kids engaged with district council around this interaction of the users, right? So mountain bikers have their tracks. You won't be walking down or up a mountain bike track, trust me, unless you have crampons and a walking stick. They're too steep really for walking. So there are walking tracks and there are biking tracks, and they are separate. It's where you have that interaction between the exit of the mountain bike track and the walking track. The walking tracks are used for pedalling up, and the mountain bike tracks come down. So the school project identified where these interaction points were and how we could either address them through signage and also through track layout, so how tracks enter walking tracks. So yeah, that's been something that has been looked at and can be easily addressed once access is enabled.
Thank you. Councillor Michael.
Thank you. Just to clarify, there are 2 trains a day.
That's what I could find at the moment, and that's on the current load. There's been increases in costs for KiwiRail freight transport, so there's less people using trains now, but at the moment I think there's about 2 trains a day.
Trains are dying.
Once in a blue moon, there's a single person.
Yeah.
Like one of those old ones.
Oh, that's kind of cool, actually. So, and to clarify, because I went straight to that as well. Big siren, there's a train coming. That's a no? What's the reasoning behind that?
Yeah, so
That's $100 siren.
Yeah. So that's what we'd like to have that re-explored. It was looked at in 2020 with WSP on behalf of the council, because the council wants the cheapest best option too, right? So, like I said, 100. What's changed in 5 years?
I'd buy a siren for you. But the bridge looks real dodgy. Are we saying that if we go over the train tracks, we avoid that bridge?
No, you have to cross a stream to then access Matapo Park over or under the train tracks. So the bridge has been identified by an engineer as not being fit for purpose for what it was designed for. If it's only used for walking, maybe that could be reassessed. Let's explore that. But yeah, there are 2 issues of access, right? So the bridge over the stream, not fit for diggers or vehicles, and then the train tracks.
And you estimate 400k for both of those, or just the bridge?
I won't say I estimate it, but that's the numbers that have been talked around.
Okay, cool. Thank you for that.
Deputy Mayor Helen.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Nice to see you. So I remember this. Britt and I have talked about this for a long time. But my understanding, there are some other issues there too. There's the privately owned land in close proximity to the access way as well. Has that situation changed at all? There was some contention there, I believe.
Yeah, I probably don't really need to address that too much, but you'll see where the blue lines are, the double lines of parallel lines. That's the parcel. The actual track heads off to the north of that, so vertically up the screen into KiwiRail. So because of the slope of the land, so it would depend on what the barriers think. Why were they put in the position in the first place when there was mention around liability for accessing a closed park? It got a bit ugly quickly through the way maybe they were addressed, so I don't think that's an issue now, but yeah.
And if you want to, you can go straight. You just have to climb up Castle bypass. There are 10 meters detour. It makes it easier to get up there. Plus with the incline.
Yeah.
If you want to climb up the incline.
Okay. And I believe there were horses using that area as well. That would be an issue to have horses, bikes, people, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so horses have always been allowed in there. It was like a trekking spot, so people would bring their horse floats and take their horses, because it's quite steep, right, so it'd be a good workout, and people could ride horses through what was a council-maintained forest. So there's redwoods in there, there's acacias planted, so that mix of exotic and native was, park-esque, let's say. So horses, bikers and walkers all need to be able to be catered for. So that's where MUG comes in, where if you're going to have something, let's make it work. So yeah.
There has to be a plan.
For sure.
Yeah, okay. Okay, thanks, guys. Thank you.
Mayor Andrew.
Yeah, great. Thank you. First thing is, Craig, I think that first slide had George at about 8 years old. So 10 years, it must have been taken about 10 years ago. Anyway, so PCBU obligations, I'm not an expert on health and safety law per se, but you mentioned that. But does anyone have any PCBU obligations in regard to health and safety, not necessarily on you take your own risk, but if there's the train track, the bridge, if the bridge collapses and someone hurts themselves, is there some responsibility by someone, whether it be council or Kiwi Rail or...
Yeah, so that's PCBUs happen at work. So if people are accessing that place for the purposes of work, then that PCBU responsibility and duty of care would strike, is my understanding.
Yeah.
So for a park, the duty of care would be to provide safe infrastructure, but if someone injures themselves while they're recreating, it's not an issue for the
Yeah, I appreciate it's work, but if there's a bridge that's been built there, for example, and it's not fit for purpose, but we accept it, is that a grey area, or is that just black and white? I don't know. I'm probably asking you, and
yeah, I'd like to be able to answer that and say no, not a problem. But yeah, I don't want to step into that realm.
Chief Executive will answer that. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, the Health and Safety at Work Act is, I think, pretty clear that it's got to be a workplace for the Act to have coverage. So if you're talking about a bridge that's been built and it's not an active workplace because there's maintenance going on or anything like that, then the Health and Safety at Work Act wouldn't apply. Different legislation around, I suppose, negligence and provision of the safe infrastructure side of things would kick in instead.
yeah, no, I assume that would be the case. I'm just wondering where an unsafe bridge might sit. So, great, no problem. The other question I had here is, talks about a local supplier, probably Emmett's or something, is it? Do that? Are they, part of their community hat on? Have you talked to them about, or Jeremy, for example, about helping out with?
There's a lot of goodwill in the community, Mayor. We haven't talked local discounts, but we have engaged, and the club has engaged with many businesses around this matter for alternative solutions to crossing the stream with a bridge from various suppliers in town. And Emmett's have been already committed in kind time to look at this problem and assess it. So yeah, there is every hope that if there can be some sort of green light given, that we can further explore that.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Councillor Ross.
Thank you. Through the chair, hypothetical. If access is improved, however it's improved, whether it's an underground tunnel or a bridge, whatever, you mentioned that some international bike riders have used this and have sung its praises. So hypothetically, if if a main point of access can be created for multiple users, be they walkers or bike people, usage is going to increase dramatically. So from a management point of view, this is a bit of a hidden diamond. It has the potential to grow into something significant for the bike riders, for local, regional, even national competitions. It could put itself on the map for the country. Hypothetically then, how is that park, it's owned by council, but do you envisage that down the track, excuse the expression, there'd be a joint management? Because you talked about cyclists going up and walkers going down and conflict signage and whatever about multiple users. How would that be managed? Because I envisage that it is going to be used a lot more if access is improved, even though a lot of people are doing it illegally. Where would the management side of it come from to promote this or maintain it and develop it?
Yeah, really good question, well identified. And my only example would be the one across the road locally, which is Hilton Park. So council-owned reserve, managed to all intents and purposes by the Mountain Bike Club. There's a working bee this Saturday to cut back gorse and keep the tracks open and keep it maintained. And it's looked after by the Mountain Bike Club, but used by dog walkers and other people from the community as well. So that's, you know, just across the road, a good example of how management can happen. Across the purposes of all users, then yeah, maybe we look at what could be created for Matapo, that we do have a broader management oversight, that is the users have a regular connecting event for Matapo. So we've had people that are wood type folk create signage for tracks so that people can find their way around Matapo just because they want to be able to do that for their family or their friends. So, you know, there is that goodwill in the community that exists for this sort of thing.
And just as a point, the reason I said that is because I watched telly last night, and I come from Upper Hutt as a child, and they have whitewater rafting up the Hutt River, which I didn't know about, right in their doorstep. So here we have potentially a national standard bike facility right on our doorstep.
Yes.
That's amazing that you can just pop out of town and there you are at the event.
Thank you.
That's why I raised it, for the future.
Councillor Philippa.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Craig, for all your work and Wongi Mountain Bike Club, etc. So just checking, just checking what bike tracks the Mountain Bike Club does use now. You just mentioned Hilton's Pit as such. Is Lismore used at all? And the Lismore Forest, is that you? Because that's more downhill, and also, sorry, Lake Wirratoa has got some usage too. That area.
Oh no, you're going to think we're greedy, aren't you? So.
No, I'm just trying to clarify what are seen as mountain bike track. What current tracks have we got?
Sure. So we have the Lake Parry Wirratoa collection, which also feeds into Harakiki, which seems to be more open now. So that's our coastal wetter season tracks. We have Hilton Park, which is our municipal park built in the District Council forest, which is a type of trail. Outside that, we have obviously the Riverside Trails and Lismore Forest. So Lismore Forest, managed by Forest 360, owned, the trees are owned by Chinese owners. That's in a constant state of change. So along with the Mountain Bike Club, I also organise a shuttle days there. So a shuttle day at Lismore means we fill trucks up with people and drag riders up the hill, and they zoom down the downhill trails. And riders come from all around the Lower North Island, from Napier, Taupo, and from Wellington up, and New Plymouth as well. So upwards of 50 riders on a shuttle day, so it's very well serviced. But Lismore's changing, right? So we have one trail at the moment, one potentially about to rebuild in a couple of months. And that's it. It services downhill riders, enduro riders, cross-country riders. So there is still tracks at Lismore, but mostly they are gravel tracks that they share with the forestry riders for that sort of work. For the mountain bike type of track, we have 1 and a bit tracks left because of the nature of harvesting.
Thank you. And second question is just, I mean, I know this is going to go through a business case or whatever, but I'm the champion of site visits these days, and especially in sport and recreation. And it would be great. I mean, I'm a little bit. Is there? You know, I know. Well, there's going to be limited access, but probably through the chair, if we could look to, you know, get a bit of a site visit of actually, this Matapo Park.
Yeah. Would
be good just to understand where you're talking about the tunnel and that.
Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Philippa, that's a very good idea. I was going to ask Craig myself, on behalf of the Sport and Rec, if we could have a site visit to get to know more about the recreation and sport of mountain biking.
Maybe to all those, to all those parts.
So
whatever.
Maybe a liaison between Councillor Philippa and yourself, Craig. We might be able to organise a few to go out there and have a look around.
And I can organise legal access too, if you like. Through my father-in-law owns a farm adjacent, and Hugh Reid and Dean Nisco have the other one. And so just to mention, we also have in Wanganui one of New Zealand's better mountain bike parks, which is privately owned, called That Place at Kawaiki. So not to downplay that, but just talk about the public ones in response to your question.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Well, there's no further questions. Thank you very much for your presentation, Britt and Craig. And now this will enter the process and be considered in the long-term plan. Thank you.
Thanks for your time, everybody. Thank you, Britt.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, I have to leave.
She has, yeah. Thank you. Right, we're doing quite well for time. The Pakatori Historic Reserve Board, the paving and crossing, Rosemary Tennant, Rangi Maniapoto, and Josh Chanjalal Mackay. Councillor Josh. No, he's just Josh today.
I think this is my first time in the presenters table, so quite an auspicious occasion, I feel. Rangi, our Crown appointee, does send his apologies for today. So you've got myself and Rosemary Tennant, who's the administrator of the Pakatori board. So I'm going to start off with just a couple of comments before handing it over to Rosemary to get into some of the final details of the proposal. But I wanted to start, first of all, really by reminding Council and this committee by extension of the important relationship that does exist between the Pakatori Historic Reserve Board and this council. To give some historical context, this board emerged after the reclamation that took place of the reserve of the land in 1995, beginning on the 28th of February for 80 days. Fast forward a couple of years, and there was a tripartite agreement established between council, iwi, and the Crown. And the following year, in 2002, the Historic Reserve Board was stood up with 3 representatives from council, of which I'm currently a member, alongside Danny Lebo and Kyle Dalton. There are also 3 iwi appointees and then 1 Crown appointee as well, and our board receives a grant each year from or through the Department of Conservation, and we're charged with the governance and management and promotion of Pakatori going forward. So this project here has been one that was first mooted around 10 years ago, wasn't it, Rosemary? And it was a council project, so I think it's really important to emphasise that. But what I'll do is I'll hand it over to Rosemary now to talk about some of the finer details around that proposal and why we're bringing it back to you today for further discussion. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou, Chairman Vincent, Mayor and councillors and everyone else here. As Josh introduced me, I'm Rosemary. I'm the administrator for the Pakatori Historic Reserve Board. I'm engaged to do that work on behalf of the board. And for a number of years, people have been saying around the table, what happened to that paving project that we all talked about some years ago? And I know this will be of no surprise to a number of the people in the room here who've been here since 2011, but there are a number of new people in this room as well. So in 2011, there was a riverfront development project which was started off here by the council with the idea of enhancing the riverbank, enhancing its relationship to making a precinct and joining it up to Pukinamu with a sightline. And part of that was a raised crossing which went over Taupoki across to Pakatori, linking the river and the land there. There were a number of reasons for that. One was the idea of traffic calming along Taupoki, an area which has now become very, you go down there on a Saturday, it's busy and it's quite dangerous. And so the idea was that would be starting the linkage, starting the kind of warning traffic of the public riverfront precinct that was coming up. The council did a lot of work on this. You produced your the riverfront development plan. Part of that was this paving plan, which I think you've all had a look at of the crossing. And Council Officer Rui Leitao, at the time roading officer, trekked around. He did all the consultation. He consulted with the Pakatori Historic Reserve Board, who are the kaitiaki of the land known as Pakatori. And at that time, the board decided that it really was a much wider iwi issue and directed him to go and talk to the Kaumatua Konehira Committee, who also ran through it and talked a lot about it and were very excited about it. I was sent here from a meeting of the Pākaituri board, at which John Mai, Ken Mayer, several members of several senior iwi members were present, and they were all saying, "Oh, why don't we get on with that?" And it seems to me that you've done the work, you've costed it out. It may have been that the full aspiration of the riverfront development was beyond your means, or there were other priorities that were needed. There's sticking points that could be for this project, finances, I guess. The archaeological work was done. You commissioned a very fine report from Archaeology North, and in his conclusion, he's recommending to the Heritage New Zealand Pohere Taonga that they go ahead with it. And so really we're just here to put it in front of you with the hope of perhaps opening that file again and thinking, we've done a lot of work on this already, it's a really good idea, it will make the place look better, it'll make the place safer, why don't we give it another think? And that's my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions anyone has.
Yeah. Thank you, Rosemary. Councillor Ross.
Oh, thank you. Through the chair, in my readings, it mentioned that the crossing also has artwork associated with it to be completed at the same time. So my query would be is, if I've read it correctly, there is artwork attached to it.
Not that I understand, Ross. The paving is of a particular pattern, but it really was just paving that was going across there. It was a raised.
Is that the artwork, the pattern, paving pattern? Okay, one and the same.
Well, I don't know what the artwork you might be mentioning is, but we weren't pushing to have any artwork put in any place. It was just the attractive raised crossing that was coming through. Okay.
Specifically, part 2, that's it. From across from Matua Gardens to across Tapokī to the riverbank side.
Yep.
Roughly.
Have you had a look at this one?
I'm trying to get a visual of the actual point across the road. Is it anywhere near the coffee cart?
So the road across there, the Motua monument with the Weeping Woman monument it's just coming up past that. So it comes across the road and is past that. And that was part of the discussion, was that it does involve, if you bring the paving into the gardens, into Pākaituri, then there was the issue of the curtilage around that.
But it's not associated with the Weeping Woman statue specifically, is it? There's no connection, just that's location.
There's no connection, but there is, around all historical monuments, there's an area of, I think, 5 metres, which is a curtilage, which, so that you can't, slap a sign right next, that kind of thing.
Right. And it's nice to see you again. It's been a long time.
Very nice to see you too, Ross.
So on the river side, it would be about where Hattrick's Wharf is. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Glenda.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. You talk about various reports have been done. I'm not sure when they were done, but would any of them, particularly the archaeological one, would they need a refresh for this work to be picked
this
up?
is the 2018 draft report that was prepared by Archaeology North for the council. It will still be in your system somewhere. I have a copy of it because they lent it to me. And I would recommend having a read of that, because it really, in terms of the history, it's the best it really is great. And I don't know whether it was taken further. As I say, you go back to the records of the Roading Committee back in 2017, 2018 was the last I had any dealings with people around this about progressing it forward. It still seemed to be on the books at that stage. And I'm not quite sure if you took it down to Heritage New Zealand Poe Taonga or not, and whether it just stopped up here with the for a reason I don't know at the council level.
Right. You finished? Councillor Michael.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, it's probably a question for yourself, or through to CE. Do we know why this hasn't progressed, and or do we have anything in the budget currently for crossing on Taupo Key? The reason why I say that, because it is actually very dangerous. Like, I'm crossing there daily, and cars do start to really ramp up their speed towards the park there. So, I presume we're going to be doing something for crossings there at some stage. So is there anything in the pipeline already that we can jump on for this?
I'll just ask the Chief Executive to reply.
Through you, Chair, I don't know why it hasn't progressed, not across the history of this. In terms of what we've got in the budget, I'm not aware of anything, and I have had a quick look through our existing LTP budgets and nothing's jumping out at me, but I would need a little bit of time just to double check I'm not missing anything that's buried in, say, a roading budget somewhere.
Yeah, it does seem like a very common sense thing, and to coordinate it with a historical art reserve, thank you, which makes sense to me. I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I just add in? Just wanted to re-emphasise that alongside the practical nature of why we might put in a crossing there in terms of access from one side of the road to the other, it does carry important cultural significance as well, because while the Western world, if you like, designated that a roadway go through there, the perspective of tangata whenua is that entire area is Pākai Tori. It was, possibly a pā site, it was a space of trade and so on. And so this is also about making sure that the historic reserve, which is designated, is connected to the awa to represent the historical view of iwi around that site being a whole, not actually separated by a roadway.
Can I just say that the initial proposal at the time was to divert the traffic at Bates Street up around past the courthouse down Marketplace, so that whole stretch around that bend was closed to traffic. I think that proved to be a little impractical, and then it was settled on this particular crossing. But there was the cultural side of it and the appeals from iwi about the use of the river, and that was the driving force. Thank you.
Just a extra question,
Michael.
Chair. Thank you.
Yep.
Based on that, can I add to the action that the assumption being that this is a crossing, therefore cars must give way, as I'm assuming then from a cultural point of view? So from a cultural point of view, if it's from the reserve to the awa, therefore it shouldn't just be a raised place, it should be a legal crossing that cars must give way to.
That would be a decision for roading and people like that. I mean, iwi would very much prefer that there wasn't a road there at all, frankly, but that's probably an aspiration a bit too far. I think this was a happy compromise that people were comfortable with. And the thing that struck me was that you'd gone so far with it, you'd done so much work and presumably put so many resources into it. And it seems a real shame that something that everybody thought was a great idea seems to have stumbled somewhere.
So if I could just add that action, Chair, just to look at that, because there's many places we have crossings where the cars must give way signs. So this could be a really nice looking area as well as a significant give
Well,
way.
the process from here, Councillor Michael, is that this will come back as part of this long-term plan process. At that time, it'll be accompanied by officers' comment and recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation, Rosemary and Josh. You can now resume your seat, Councillor Josh. Thank you. Now there's a motion to move here. I'll move it from the chair as a recommendation that the Aspirations and Projects Committee receive the report, Community-Led Initiatives. As a seconder, please. Councillor Glenda. Those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Well, that brings the meeting to a close. Thank you very much for your attendance. Oh, 5.3, is it? Damn. No, it's all right. I had somewhere to go. Oh, we'll open the meeting again. Point of entry business case update. Lance and Stuart.
So yeah, this doesn't need to take too long. So this is just another update for you, providing an update on the status of the current point of entry business cases. So that is sort of how many have been completed. You'll see the sort of percentages of how far along we are. Really happy with the progress. But also providing the latest list of the projects so that you can start reading them in your own time, so that when time comes to review them through your workshop process, the long-term plan process, you'll have that bit more depth of understanding to be informed in your decisions. So that's part of the reason. Just wanted to reinforce why you're actually getting this list, as are the public. So in due course, a full list of projects. This is still not finalised. The order could change slightly yet. It'll still be a draft, but the full list will be submitted and workshopped by elected members before coming back to this committee for adoption into the long-term plan. So, other than that, I'll take it as read. Any
Thank
questions?
you. I'll just make a comment here, Lance, that there is confusion about the actual process from today of these point of entry business cases, just where they're heading. And as members, we're asking a lot of questions all the time, and we're asking probably the same questions each time. I did mention to the Chief Executive that some sort of flowchart which was available to the members could be very helpful. So it showed us a one-pager of how a business case proceeds through the approval process to the end. And that would be quite helpful. So if one of those could be produced and distributed to members, I think it would be helpful.
Yeah, no problems. We can do that.
Yeah. Are there any questions? Yeah, Andrew.
Yeah, no, look, great work. I think this is exciting that when you just answered my question as you were talking, Lance, was that it's going really well. So the process seems to be working well. Just a couple of questions. First one is around, I've circled the word targets on page 49, that is on the first page, under progress today. There's a table there with a number of the different council departments there. So how are those targets, I guess, of initiatives / projects, point of entry business cases, how are they established?
So right at the beginning, there was our team sat down with the relevant work groups to work out what was already in the in the plans for projects, going forward that would likely cross over into the long-term plan. And from that, a number. So the original number was about 255 were identified, and then after a bit of bundling and a bit of taking out and resetting, it got down to about 150. And so that's the high-level target at this stage. It's subject to fluctuating depending on what else may come in. But that's how it started. So the target, and then broken down into the various work groups. So for infrastructure, whatever the target is, that's how many we've identified that they should be doing if they are to put everything in their work plan into this process or in their
Okay, so that follows on my next question then. So the target seems to be number of initiatives or projects, right?
Number of projects, yeah.
Yep. So what if, so for example, looking at corporate and IT, just say there's one big ERP project that's implemented, and that is a massive cost to it. So it's only one project, but worth a lot of dollars, as opposed to 16 projects worth a little bit of dollars each. How does that? So is it actually, wouldn't it be constrained on the budget, not on number of projects?
Yeah. So yeah, you're right. So that target is just essentially an internal number for us to track how we're progressing against what we think should go forward into the long-term plan.
Okay.
The target number, that's nothing to do with the finances as such. It's a separate.
Okay, that's fine. So it could be different.
Through you, Chair, if I may add to the Deputy CE's answer here, the label target is probably a little bit misleading. It's not any kind of performance target. It's just simply a high-level estimate of how many business cases we thought we were going to have to write at the beginning of this process, so that we can have some kind of measure of our progress. Are we aiming to write 100, 200, 300? And that number was simply derived from looking at the existing long-term plan and how many budget lines we had. So it's not a target per se.
Yeah, no, I get that now, and it's not premised or constrained by budget or anything like that. Yeah, so, okay, that's fine. So the other question I had was, there is a list of projects. I'm just wondering if it's possible, first of all, so tell me if it's not, but what I think would be useful to see is a couple of things, is the next 20 projects, for example, that don't quite make it. They're on the cusp. Do you have that list as well? Because I'm used to working on a list like that that's got a whole bunch of projects, and there's a few that didn't quite make it, that might be next cab off the rank, depending on how priorities changed. And it could be that we have community projects or council projects or whatever they are, that we've got visibility that they've made it to the next cab off the rank. They're not quite on the list because we have to have constraints. Yep. So is it possible just to have a list of the next?
I think it'll be a pretty short list, because that list is the entire list essentially.
Okay.
So the lowest score, we're keeping them on the list. For example, the ones towards the bottom at the moment. That's not to say you can't move them up, but everything is kind of on there. There might be a small number that don't even make it to the list, because an officer might start typing it up and realise actually that this is no longer within strategically aligned. So that idea might die at the desk, sort of thing. But essentially, you will see them all.
Okay.
Is kind of how I see it.
Well, that's interesting.
Some will be above the line, and some will be below the line.
Oh, so it's one's below the line that I'm talking about.
That's what you'll figure that out.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll get to that point. Gotcha. I see. Yep,
Chief Executive would like to answer.
Yeah, look, again, given the Chair's comment around maybe a flowchart being useful, by way of explanation, what you're seeing through these reports is every single business case that's been completed. We aren't, at this point, drawing a cut line, but that will come with time once we've got a full and complete list, and then we can see how our rates forecasts are looking against your appetite for rating the community. Then we can pitch where the cut line is based on our ability to pay for projects, our capacity to deliver them, and then you can start having that horse trading or discussion around what should be above and below the line. So it'll come with time, but you're already 2 steps ahead of us.
Yeah, I get that now. I was kind of, when I was talking, I was thinking, oh, jeepers, I'm going a bit too fast here. Okay, thank you.
Okay, there's Councillor Ross.
Yep, thank you. Devil's advocate. On the last page, it says, there remains discretion in the process for elected members to adjust the priority of a project, regardless of its scoring. Then it gives a however. So there's discretion about us adjusting the ranking. It doesn't say that we can say no to a project. It doesn't say that. The final list of, that's part one. The final list of ranked projects will be presented to the Strategy and Policy Committee for adoption. This will be the first time in this new process those projects will come to the Strategy and Policy Committee. That's a lot of projects. So whether councillors buy into the ranking or whether enough councillors say we don't want this project, I'm looking at time constraints. I'm not looking at saying, I'm hoping I'm not looking at 150 projects and within 2 hours we go, and we move on, or are we setting aside 2 days anticipating for the first time around that a councillor might buy into the ranking or a councillor or two may buy into the project altogether. I'm just doing another hypothetical. I'd just like to know what I'm anticipating.
Yeah, so I think we need to get clearer, and that the flow chart will be clearer around, because I think the strategy and policy comment in here is probably misleading. It's probably actually back to this committee. The time for the chance to review and work through the list, if you like, is you'll workshop that before getting to that final meeting where you actually adopt it into the long-term plan. So, and there could be, I don't know how many we've got planned. Could be a couple of workshop sessions to get through them all, but
So
I mean,
just
part of the reason of having them available to you now, so you can start reading them now, so you're not sitting on 150 of them in one day.
Yeah, I'm just dissecting that because I've seen a couple of frowns. When you said probably this will come back to this committee before it goes to back to, that's new to me. So again, I'm buying into this as to how this is going to work out time-wise. If it's going to come back to us, there's a time factor attached to it as well. The point I wish to make is this. The members of this committee are the mayor, the deputy mayor, and the 5 newer elected councillors. So we represent a total of 7 out of 13. If this is going to come back to us, this select group of 7 or so has heard people in person presenting once. If it comes back to us a second time, we get a second engagement with it. And then when it does get to strategy and policy committee, that will be all 12. But 5 of those 12 have not had buy-in to the personal, heartfelt representations from community. 5 have not had that experience. And so in some ways, I might feel biased because I've had some personal engagement with those speakers that the other 5 have not. And this is an observation. Okay. It's not for Lance. It's a comment that I think this is a committee that really should be all of us.
Yeah. Thank you, Ross. There has been some discussion about this. I wrote an email to the mayor yesterday about it. And perhaps, would you like to comment, Andrew?
Yeah, I'm happy to comment on that. Look, a couple of things. First of all, I said that after a year we would undertake a kind of a governance review, not and with a small R. We're not looking to shake the tree and make lots of changes, but one of the bits of feedback I've had is that this should be a full committee, and so that's a consideration. So what I've actually asked Anna to do, unfortunately she's been really unwell and her family have been, so it's been really difficult for her, but she has started the process of bringing this to council to make a decision on whether this should be a full committee.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I believe that'll be coming on the October the 24th. Would you like to comment, David?
Yes, through you, Chair. I'll make a few comments. So Anna is working on the report and with the view that it will come to the next full council meeting, so that the membership of this committee can be expanded. A few points I would make, though. The purpose of us doing business cases is multifaceted, but to speak to Councillor Fallon's comment around hearing the heartfelt requests from our community, one of the purposes of the business case is to put some objectivity into the evaluation of these projects, just to guard against the emotional response to hearing directly from the community. They're full of fantastic ideas. They come in here and with their passion, it's very easy to say yes to them. And we need to have some objective assessment of the merits of the project, which is the role of the business case. So I don't think there's too much to be lost by individual councillors not actually hearing directly from the community members that will be presented to date, because we will be capturing the details in the business cases themselves. The other point I was going to make is just comparing our process to how we've run long-term plans in the past, and the volume of work that you are alluding to. As a baseline, our previous process would have been officers work in the background to compile the 10-year list of capital budgets. Visibility for elected members would probably be very limited, if you had any at all, until the point where the capital budgets would be presented, usually in a workshop setting, and then to the committee for adopting whole scale. The difference with this process, as Lance has outlined, is you have full access to all of the business cases as they're being written and developed. It gives you many, many weeks to digest them one at a time, understand what officers are proposing to put into the capital budgets. You can see in the report the list growing. You can see what is rising to the top in terms of its ranking and what is falling to the bottom in terms of its ranking. So you should hopefully have ample opportunity to be familiar with the projects, but also familiar with how the officers are going to be shaping up the recommendations in terms of what does get funded and what doesn't get funded. So that should in of itself help better prepare you for adopting the capital works program as part of the LTP. But as Lance has said, we will be dedicating quite a bit of time to workshopping this with elected members, so you have the opportunity to ask questions, challenge the ranking scoring, and then if there are things in the margins, as we've talked to previously, there will be those projects that go straight to the top of the list and they're no-brainers. Other projects will go to the bottom of the list and be easy no's. Other projects will be in and around that cut line. And then that's where you as governors will be able to put your views in and challenge the scoring and decide what is and is not in or out of the LTP. Because as we've said before, this is a tool to bring order to chaos. It doesn't give you the answer, and you're not bound to accept the rankings verbatim as they come out. Hopefully those comments are helpful.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. I have raised some concerns that I have had about the terms of reference, and that we appear to be drifting away from the terms of reference in some areas. One is that the terms of reference say that we should assess and approve, and I'm assured that that will come later on. We're at the assessing stage, and we will, as a committee, approve it later on, which reinforces the need for all councillors to be involved. The other area that does concern me is that the terms of reference refer to capital projects, and the definition of capital projects is quite specific in terms of improvements to assets and new assets and those sorts of things. And I wonder, when we're starting to hear business cases that are essentially applying for a grant, whether this is the right place for it. For instance, today's presentation from the Rural Halls Trust asking for an increase in their grant. Is that a capital project? You know, and it doesn't seem to me to be the right area, considering that there is something like 95 still to go in the point of entry here, that there needs to be some re-look at what is a capital project and what is not, and if everything is going to be treated for a capital project, how we, some assessment about how we're going to get through this. Councillor Michael.
I'd just like to thank the officers for this report, but also from the wider point of view of the work you've done with the chair around the Aspirations and Project Committee. That's going to give us the tools as governors to make objective, fiscally responsible decisions, because as you know, I've said up till now, I don't think we can say hand on heart that we've made fiscally responsible decisions because we've never had the tools or data or information to objectively make those decisions. The lines are going to be so much fun to debate, and I'm so looking forward to it. As I said to many people, there should be 2 lines. We can get into there 2 lines, 3 lines, or 1 line, but I'd like to thank this committee as well as the officers, because I can start to see it come together, that as a governor I can see from top to bottom the highest value to the least value pro rata of dollar, which is what our people want to see. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Look, we're having some comments here, and perhaps I should put the resolution, and then I can open it up if there's any further comments to be made. So I'll put the resolution that the Aspirations and Projects Committee receive the report, point of entry business case. Seconded Peter. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Oh, sorry, I didn't. I shouldn't have done that, should I?
No.
Comment. Now, Jenny, you had a comment or a question.
I guess it was more of a comment and this listening to this whole section. Obviously, all of these these 2 pages need to come to all councillors. They wouldn't come to this committee. I did get the impression that the ones that we've seen today, they have the flavour of people who come to us in the annual plan, long-term plan process and give us what their wishes. They're actually having the opportunity to come earlier and provide a case. So I think that there's benefit in that, but I actually don't think that's the purpose of this committee that I thought this committee was going to be. I thought it was going to be about big ideas and things like that, and it almost got the impression, and this may be it's called an extraordinary meeting, and I have been away, so I don't, and I'm not on this committee, so I don't know why it's called an extraordinary meeting. Maybe because of this very reason, but it seemed like a grant meeting, and that seems odd. That's all. So I'm not sure that this has actually worked out what it is yet, and maybe it will. I remain hopeful. Thank you.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary meeting because it's out of cycle. This is set up on a 3-monthly basis, and this is an extra one to the one we had 2 weeks ago.
As opposed to, it was a special meeting because it had these particular people here. It wasn't that purpose. So therefore, obviously, it has the flavour of a community grant, different from the community grants that we did the other day, which are the voluntary organisations, but it's actually starting to take on the flavour of that here. So I think it's got a little bit of an identity problem.
Thank you. Councillor Peter.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, I'd just like to say that my fellow councillor, Michael, has said everything that I would like to have said, but only better. So I fully endorse what he says here. And we have to take the emotional out of it and be objective about a lot of these projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ross.
Yeah.
Final comment.
It is my final. Yeah. This committee is still evolving. We still seem to have some questions about process. The flow chart will greatly assist. Once we get through this first 12 months, I'm sure the numbers, well, one colleague will say the numbers will increase dramatically, but I'm hoping the numbers will drop dramatically to something more reasoned. So we're still finding our way somewhat. I originally, when this was first mentioned from the Mayor, it was about community bringing their projects to us, and it was very exciting, and it is very exciting. And then somewhere along the line it evolved into internal projects becoming more transparent from management to us to see, to look at and ask questions on. So it's evolved into a part 2 of community and internal, and I accept that. When the chair referred to the word capital projects, just saying, in the document, in the purpose section, there are 4 dot points. 3 times it mentions capital projects. In the terms of reference itself, capital is not mentioned at all. So maybe somewhere in the background, Chair, we can just tidy this up with a redefinition or a substitute word, or not get too hung up on it, but it just needs to be shifted or tidied up slightly. Thank you.
Right. Well, I'll move from the chair the recommendation that the Aspirations and Projects Committee receive the report, point of entry business case. Do I have a seconder? Mayor Andrew. Those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried, and the meeting is closed. Thank you.